Thanks to ACGI for inviting me to present this webinar today. Web personalization through AMS integration. In other words, how can we use our AMS data to help power personalization through our website? While personalization seems like sort of a hot topic right now, it really isn't a new concept. In fact, back in the late 90s, David Weinberger, who at the time wrote a book called The Clue Train Manifesto, and it was and is considered a futurist, said, personalization, the automatic tailoring of sites and messages to the individuals viewing them so that we can feel that somewhere there's a piece of software that loves us for who we are. So the question then becomes, where are we today? We've all likely seen what Amazon does with the data it has on us, and your members' profiles in your AMS are not much different than your profile in Amazon, and as we'll see today, can be leveraged in a very similar way. Netflix, too, of course, knows what we've watched and then thinks they know what else we might be interested in. Modern examples aside, if we had to distill what personalization is down to words, I guess this is how I would define it. Presenting web content based on what we know about a user with the intent to optimize their online experience. Well, that's simple enough, but notice the qualifying word there, intent. More on that later. So what are some of the benefits? Well, it does provide a very relevant experience. Netflix and Amazon, Apple Music, weather apps, to name just a few. Increases conversions. Users like and trust when you seem to know what they want, and research shows they're actually more likely to buy or convert. Of course, it improves efficiencies, and we've got return visitors, but it allows people to bond with your brand, and this is important. Personalization can endear your members to you and your website, and hence your brand. And then lastly, in quotes, giving people what they want. But we put it in quotes because that is, again, what our intent is. Can we achieve it? That's the question. Okay, with some of the basics out of the way, let's jump right into a potential real-world scenario. Let's imagine a fictional member of our organization. This is a mini persona for that fictional person. And actually more fleshed out personas can be a tool in your personalization toolbox. But again, more on that later. Let's just take in the basics of Cheryl here and see how we could personalize some information for her. Well, her name's Cheryl. She's been a member for 5 years. She's attended our last 2 events, but she's not registered for the current event, and she lives in Chicago. So let's take a look at what could be a potential way, and I want to stress potential way, we could personalize an event page based on what we know about Cheryl. So take a look here. And yes, there is much thought work and data analysis and feasibility and even permissions from members we would need before we could actually do a page like this. But let's suspend all that just for the sake of, for now, for the sake of portraying and making an example out of what's possible when it comes to personalization. So, we've got our event is in Orlando, so we've got the Orlando weather, and she's in Chicago, so we're going to present the Chicago weather, and boy, it doesn't look great to be in Orlando, Cheryl. We have simple conference information, but then we know she's been to the last 2 events. We're saying to her by name, Cheryl, you've been to the last 2. What are you waiting for? You should come to Orlando as well. Here's your register button. Here's people you may know that have already registered. How might we know that? Are these people that she's in a committee with that we can figure out through the AMS? Is she connected through some social software that we might have an understanding of what other people in our AMS system she's connected to? And can we present that information to her? Some sessions you may be interested in, Cheryl. How might we know that? Well, we know what sessions are going to be at this event, and we'd likely know what sessions potentially she attended at the other event. Sometimes we have this information, sometimes we don't. But again, this is for an example to show what potential elements we could do for personalization. And this is just really one of a multitude of ways you could do something like this. It's the very top of the iceberg. when it comes to personalization. But you can see how much more engaging the experience becomes when you know something about the user and can give them the feeling that you know them and you can talk to them directly. To put this into sort of business terms, more than one study has shown that this type of personalization increases conversions, which of course translates into more revenue for you and your organization. So what do we need to achieve something like this? I mean, what are the systems at play? What's the process? Well, these are the things we're going to cover in today's webinar. So, what do we need to do? What are the systems? There's two systems at the core of the effort. Your CMS, your content management system that your website is built on, and your AMS, your association management software. So what we're building and what we have to work with is a set of data, the things we know about the user. And we're building that set of data upon a person's login to the website, upon their profile, like we talked about Amazon, that we know based on data in the AMS. So each time somebody logs into your website, the CMS talks to the AMS and pulls over the relevant information that we want to know about that person that's logged in. And then we use that data to show and hide information in a personalized fashion. Marketing automation is mentioned here because a combination of blending the CMS and AMS actually creates sort of a marketing automation environment, doesn't it? And for those who aren't familiar with marketing automation, it generally refers to software like Marketo or HubSpot that collect user data for businesses that don't have an AMS and helps them present personalized content on their website. And it's not to say, actually, that an association can't also have a triumvirate, so to speak, of a CMS, AMS, and a marketing automation tool. Actually do. It's to say that we can create a like environment of marketing automation if we're smart with our CMS and AMS. So those are some of the tools involved. And so what types of personalization are there? Where there's implicit and explicit, with a natural third being a hybrid or a blended approach of both. So what's implicit? Well, this is when the user is not logged in. We can actually still determine information about a user when they're not logged in, like their location, maybe a keyword they searched your site on. What hour or day or month or season is it? Have they previously visited other pages on your website or been to your site before? How long have they been on your site during this visit? Those are just a few of the implicit or not logged in elements that we could personalize through. Then explicit is more what we're talking about here. In a logged in state, they're logged in, so we're pulling information from the AMS and we know this about them. A multitude of things we could know, including member status, previous purchases, events attended or registered like Cheryl. Have we asked them any polls or surveys? Do we have any of that data as well? You could see how blending and grabbing from some of this data that we have on users from a multitude of facets can be hugely valuable in the personalization process. And blended can be much like we saw with Cheryl's page. We had implicit, the weather based on her geography, and explicit, how many events she's attended. Here's another great example of implicit personalization. This is one of our clients who heard from their members as we built their website that while it's an international organization, the experience of users felt a little westernized. It didn't feel culturally relevant based on where you were visiting in the world. And as you can see from these images, the hero image, that main area on the web page just below the navigation bar, changes to be culturally relevant based on where in the world a particular person is visiting their website from. So a really neat and easy way to implement implicit personalization. So how do we do this? It's just not something we can do in an ad hoc fashion. If you want to be successful, you really need to follow the process. And there are many considerations as you go along the path. Here are 8 steps required to do personalization right. And I'll go through them. Defining goals is an obvious first step, but don't underestimate the need to do it. We need to be careful not to simply do personalization for the sake of personalization. That will come up again as we talk here today, just because we can. We've seen clients run into that problem when you can't map your proposed personalization up to a goal, the end result obviously is a little lacking. And as we consider our 8 steps, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but instead provide you the questions you need to ask and answer as part of the process, as you can see here. This brings more of an action to you and your team if you're serious about personalization, as opposed to me just telling you what a goal might be. It's really the kind of work that you as an organization need to do. And I won't read through each of the 5 questions for each of the 8 steps, okay, but I will highlight the ones that are worth mentioning. In the case of goals, something to make sure you consider is not only what personalization looks like when you launch it, but how do you make sure all content creators are using best practices to keep it intact? When you're writing content, for example, are you thinking about how it fits into the full personalization ecosystem? Okay, you can see how that can be a consideration. So we know we've established goals and those are what we need, but what opportunities are there and how do we identify those? Well, where in the site will the personalization be used seems obvious, but when you start mapping that out, that can be a little more than you might imagine. What will trigger the personalization? As we said, is it implicit? Is it explicit? What kinds of things will trigger the personalization? Is there any shared content between opportunities? As I said, from now on, if you're doing personalization, anytime you create content, you need to think about how it fits in to the personalization ecosystem. Define user paths. A couple things to highlight here. One, remember that a conversion can be soft in that it might just be to get someone to read a page or to raise awareness. Also keep in mind how your structure of content on the pages might be affected by hiding and showing certain personalized content. We don't want to lessen the user experience. Okay. Will the new architecture or design need to be created to achieve each path? So do we need to revamp our website in some way if we're not doing a redesign to accommodate for some of these paths? Remember, all of these steps are important, and all of these facets and steps of our process are important to consider. So we had Cheryl's little bio page. Well, it's important to have personas like that, but even more in depth can help us map what content makes sense. So let's take a look as we transition from defined user paths into the personas and scenarios that can help us make up those paths. Okay, so here we have the small scale persona that we built for Cheryl. And we saw that, yes, we can, in fact, with something this simple, create some personalization. Likely, you'd want to create something a little more in-depth. This example might be a little too far. I've highlighted in yellow some of the areas that I think are worth looking at and worth considering. This is an example from a HubSpot customer and client as to how they've built a persona. Again, I think this might be a little overkill for what you're trying to do. But you get the idea of to what extent we could create these. And again, keep in mind, we're not going to have just one, we're going to have multiples. So to create 5 or 6 of these for potential people coming to your website that require personalization, this might be a little much. Here's the kind that we build for our clients right here. And as I said, you'll have more than one of these, but having a brief history on the person, even a picture to get a vibe for who they are, what their lifestyle is, and what their web usage is. These are the kind of things that help us build and create effective personalization. Defining segments. So how do we segment our people or our content to make sure we're serving them the right content? I'll give you a second to read through these questions. Then I'll show you an example. What we have here is just a snippet from a much larger Excel file, but these are the same folks that did those culturally relevant images as well. We have a segment 1 and a segment 2, and what we see in the first column is, what is the unique motivator for this type of visitor? And then what are the segment goals fall beneath that? And what are the segmentation data do we have on? So for global visitors, that this organization is for me is focused on an international audience. It's not just North America focused. Okay. Segment goal, engage beyond the homepage. Let's not lose people on the homepage because they haven't felt like it was a culturally relevant experience for them. If you look at segment 2, the nursing student is someone else that might be coming to the site. They want to learn general information. Their questions could be, what is SPTI? How should I join? What's in it for me? Segment goals, we want them to join and go through the induction process. Okay. Again, just a snippet, but it gives you an idea of the kind of data and the kind of work that needs to be done before you embark on changing anything on your website. And then we come to the step in the process that says identify data. So it's one thing to have an idea, and it's another to have the data or the content to feed that idea, right? We talked about opportunities, we talked about segments. Do we have the data, and where is it? These questions really sum up what you need to look for and what you need to think about. And it harkens back to our previous idea of, are we using explicit or implicit approach? And if so, where is the data and how do we get it? So that's the first question. Where is the data that we will use to optimize the content? We may need to map that on the site. Is it included? We talked about how we pull from this, go into the AMS and pull the information into the CMS so that we can personalize. Are all of those fields that will be required for personalization a part of that pull currently, or is there some technical work that needs to be done? Do we have the bottom one? Do we have an established taxonomy for website or content data? How have we categorized or tagged our content, and will that and can it help us in the personalization process? Create and implement content. We've done a previous webinar on our 7-step formula to create quality content, but here are some questions as it relates directly to personalization and creating content. And, you know, we really can't stress enough how important a content plan is, and it must include who is going to create the content and also who's going to implement it. It could be different people. And then how do we manage this ongoing? Again, ongoing governance of your site cannot be stressed enough. It's one thing to build a new site and have it look, you know, shiny and new when you launch, but what does it look like 6 months later? How have we governed the site ongoing? Okay, you can see some of the questions we need to ask here. Some we've already talked about, but can we repurpose existing or new content in any way? Who's going to create it? Who's going to implement it? And how much of it? And when is it due by? Okay, all very, very big questions as part of the process. And then, like any good process, we want to test and measure. Okay? What metrics should we track? They don't need to be all of them. I can't tell you what they are because they vary by group, by association, by your goals. But we don't want 20 or 30, you know, 5. What are 5 key metrics? And then what will the actions be that we take based on those metrics that we gather? Are they actionable metrics? If not, maybe we don't need to track them. Maybe they're just informational, but we'd like them to be actionable. And then again, talking about ongoing, we can measure and we can report, but much like, you know, something like search engine optimization, you need to continually refine, seek feedback and tweak. Personalization is not, I repeat, is not something that is one and done. So here's some just to pull out. Did we determine the shelf life of each opportunity, or do they just go on in perpetuity? Do we need to establish new metrics based on our changes to content processor metrics? Okay. Can we create a structured content process to create efficiencies ongoing? Okay, how do we continue to refine, and how do we do that? So those are the 8 steps of our process. In addition to that, we have best practices, and that makes sense. We're following our process and we know what those steps are, but what are some of the best practices to be intertwined in here? One of them is to focus on context, not content, context. Having an idea of what content you'd like to display for a user based on certain information you know about them, you know, like whether they signed up for an event recently, that's great. But factoring in any context at play is critical. Are they on a mobile device? Where might they be at the moment they're taking in the content? Are they at work? Are they at home? So there is more to consider, and context is a big piece of that. Understanding the user intent, we talked about what our intentions are by doing personalization, but what is the user's intent? Okay, we also need to factor that in. What are they trying to do, and why are they trying to do it? Will the personalized experience aid in that intent, or will it hinder it? Leverage like experiences. The last thing you want to do is confuse members with too much personalization. Also, by creating personalization or personalized experiences that mimic other personalized experiences, users might be more familiar. In other words, if you create something that looks like their experience they've already had on Amazon, it will help keep them familiarized and avoid confusion. And you don't want to slice too thin. Personalization for the sake of personalization that just keeps going on and on and on and on and on, again, leads to confusion and an almost impossible scenario to manage ongoing. And there's nothing worse than a personalization campaign that gets abandoned halfway through, because that just really inhibits the user experience in a very big way, inhibits how you can measure moving forward, and usually involves some dismantling of content and processes, which is never what we want to be. Aid, don't inhibit. We spoke about that a little bit already, not for the sake. And then be iterative. This is something that can't stress enough, is that you don't have to do all your personalization in one fell swoop. You can do it iteratively, and you should. Just start small. Do something simple. Maybe it's implicit personalization at first before you get into the explicit. Maybe it's just the weather, whatever it might be, but keep it very simple and see what kind of traction you get with members. Talk to them about it. Again, test, measure, and then refine. So you might be saying, yeah, okay, Chris, I get it. It seems like something worth doing, even though it does probably look like way more work than you might have thought. But is this the real deal? Is it a trend, or is it here to stay? So the short answer is it's here to stay, and it's likely only going to grow from here. I think intuitively we all may get that, but let's talk about that a little bit. Here's some data. A company called Evergage and ResearchScape International surveyed 250 organizations of all sizes from around the world about their marketing operations and implementation of personalization. Here's some of the data they got back. Are you using personalization in any of the following channels? Well, you can see 56% are personalizing on their website. In addition, this study found that 85% of companies are now implementing some sort of personalization. However, most companies' personalization initiatives aren't really making the grade, with the majority of the marketers, 55%, giving their own and their competitors a grade of C or lower on their efforts of personalization. So are we doing it? Yes. Do we feel confident in doing it? Do we feel like we're doing it well? Not quite yet. That's why it's important, like we said, to be iterative, refine after we report and measure. Here's some more data. 75% of U.S. consumers like it when brands send them personalized messages and offers. 73% like to buy from brands that personalize the shopping experience. This is all very relevant to the kind of things we do with an association. And most customers are willing to trade information for more relevant offers. 76%. Do you get more relevant offers and discounts when you share information? Sure. Do you value the relevancy? Absolutely. That's what the numbers are telling us, okay? So it sounds like maybe we're sold now, right? We feel like, okay, I get how to do it. I get why it's a good thing. I get why it's going to continue to be around and continue to grow. So let's look at our previous scenario that we did for Cheryl on our events page with some more options, okay, with how it might work in the real world. So this is what the page might look like before Cheryl is logged in, and we don't know much about her, but we do know information about the event, and even something like that we could pull out of the AMS, like over 234 people have already registered as of today, okay? Find the best airfare from Chicago. Well, I know you're from Chicago implicitly, and I could just customize links to various travel sites or what have you. So those are some simple ways implicitly we could just improve the personalization just a little bit more. We don't want to take it too far, and I'll talk about why in a little bit. But then here we are, as we saw before, where Cheryl was logged in. Okay, and these are all the elements we saw before. Well, what if we were successful here and Cheryl went ahead and registered? Okay, what might happen the next time she comes to this page? Well, that's what we're looking at here. Again, some of the basic information about the event to create contextual relevance, to create familiarity for Cheryl, because everything's kind of laid out the same, so she knows she's back on that same page again. It isn't completely unfamiliar. But hey, Cheryl, we can't wait to see you in Orlando in October. Is your hotel booked? Book the hotel. Okay. These folks are going to the golf outing. Are you? We might know that she's not registered for that yet. Maybe she is. Okay. Some of this stuff may fall off pages as the registration deadline falls off. We can have some of these things fall off as well. And here are some things we know you signed up for. Do you want to modify your track? Again, some of these things we track along the way as associations and some we don't. We're just providing examples here, but you can really see how you can perpetually go further and further and further with this, and it creates more and more engagement and a more, a much improved user experience. Okay, so those are all good. The one question we have to ask though is how far is too far with personalization? We don't want to fly too close to the sun, in other words. Okay. If it confuses the user in any way, we've overstepped it. If it makes the user uncomfortable, we get into the creepy factor where it feels like someone's looking over our shoulder while we're at the computer. That doesn't enhance the environment at all. And there's organizations or companies like Amazon that could probably get to that degree if they really wanted to. Apple as well, right, with all the data they have on us from our iPhones and what have you. But they know we need to have a dialed back approach. If it becomes difficult for your staff to manage because you've sliced too thin and it goes on and on and on, and every time you create content, you have to think about one of 100 channels or opportunity channels of personalization this might be involved in, that's going to just become too difficult to manage. And when it becomes unmeasurable for some of those absolute same reasons. So I'd like to share with you now, as we sort of wind down, some of the next steps that you can take at your organization as you take on this journey into personalization. Discuss with your members what type of personalization they'd find valuable. I mean, that makes sense. Ask them. Let's not do a build and they will come. Draft a mission statement. What are we really trying to do here with our personalization? What's the mission? Draft SMART objectives. You probably know what SMART means: specific, measurable, attainable. Right? For each area that personalization is being considered for, as we talked about goals. Okay? Let's make sure we understand why we're doing this. You have to think ahead, too, about where the data is that will drive that personalized content. Do you need to create it? Okay, these are some things you can just start doing right now, just anecdotally get some people in a room, and these are some of the questions and next steps that you can start asking just to kind of get some traction and get things going. Okay, what's a multi-stage project plan for how personalization will be rolled out? Again, if you're in a room with a flip chart, write some stuff down like this year we'll do this, next year we'll do this, in 3 years we'll be here. Let's focus on events first and advocacy second, whatever it might be. Just get that high-level plan, get the juices flowing. Something else you can think about too is just the plan Bs, okay? That's just, it can be a next step, it can be a best practice even as well, just to understand if this doesn't work, how do we dial it back? How do we roll it back? What is a plan B to switch from this track to the other track? All very, very important elements to the process. Okay, so in closing, what I'd like to say is just what it says here. Personalization is an amazing way to customize your members' online experience. It's a way to distinguish you from the various sources of competition for your members' attention. It's what people expect, right, when they arrive at your site. And with the right guidance, strategy, and technology, your organization can surely make personalization a great success. So with that, I wish you guys a great luck in your pursuits. My contact information is here if you'd like to reach out further or discuss any further. Again, thank you so much to ARG and to ACGI for allowing me the opportunity to present to you today. And again, best of luck in all of your personalization pursuits. Thanks so much.